So back to autoimmunity again. We understand there could be a genetic predisposition.
Right.
Okay, and there's a spectrum. So this can actually happen years and years beforehand. And believe it or not, there is a lot of advanced testing that can be done right now to actually tell. It's called predictive autoimmunity. And there's actually a lab company called Cyrix Labs where they can actually take the blood and look at antibodies, and based on the science, they can predict when you are going to develop this actual autoimmune disease, whether it's 7 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they can give you a prediction. It's like having a crystal ball in front of you. Imagine having this crystal ball. You can actually see into the future, mind you. And if you do things now to auto-correct that course, or what we call your trajectory in the direction you're going, you can put it in remission, suppress it, or it may not even happen.
Now, think about this. You find that out, right? So you got antibodies, and you find out it's only because you're eating a certain food. Wow. So all you have to do to avoid an autoimmune condition, which basically is classified in Western medicine as something that's going to kill you because they have nothing for it other than giving you steroids, right, to suppress. You find out it could be one or two foods that you could just quit eating. And within a year or so, all the inflammation goes away. You're out of the zone of catching an autoimmune disease, all related to just stopping a couple of foods.
Yeah, and we know food is medicine. And again, this goes back to, beginning of time, that we know food is medicine, disease begins and ends in the gut. So let's discuss, there's a huge trigger right now that we're seeing, not only for autoimmunity, but other conditions too, and that is gluten. There's so much talk about this right now. So let's go ahead and discuss, a little bit what this is and how it represents and responds to maybe leaky gut syndrome and the triggers for autoimmunity and other health conditions.
Well, gluten is, simply put, it's just a protein in wheat that's really hard to digest. And the latest research on that shows that every time you eat it, and they claim now it's 100% of the people that eat it, your body has a response to where the actual cells in your intestines separate. And in that separation, which lasts for 3 days, let's say you just had one exposure, that lasts for 3 days to where now your gut's more permeable to other things that you're eating. So things make it into your bloodstream that your immune system has to react to. One of the big issues with gluten is that it is in wheat, right? If gluten was in Brussels sprouts, everybody in the world would just quit eating it tomorrow. Nobody cared, right? But it's in bread. It's in all these things that we just are trained through society to eat all the time.
Sure, and that wheat is a staple of life. This goes back 1,000 years as a very inexpensive staple, which actually supports third world countries.
Right.
When they're starving, we see wheat is shipped over, but we're not seeing autoimmunity like we do here in the United States, Canada, Europe, some of these other countries. So let's discuss what has happened to wheat. And again, when we talk about wheat, there are cross-reactivities to other rye, barley, and there are some other, again, remember, wheat is only the protein, but there are other cross-reactive wheat and other types of grains too.
Right. Once you set up the permeability issue, then you could have more of a reaction to milk. You could have more reaction to eggs, more reaction to soy, more reaction to all these things. In fact, if you usually see someone who has 20 different foods they're allergic to, it's probably because of the issue with the wheat that's causing the gut to be permeable in the first place.
Sure.
And the problem with wheat that you don't see in other countries has to do with the fact that we are such an industrial nation. And I mean, let's face it, our science is just off the charts. It doesn't mean that it's always beneficial to us. It might be beneficial to the company using it. But the reality is they've changed our wheat. It's no longer similar to what it was thousands of years ago.
So your grandma's wheat is not the same today, and you don't see the autoimmunity outside of celiac disease.
Right.
We have so many new diagnoses and issues with autoimmunity. So just look at the science with the industrialized world. Wheat used to be wheat fields. okay, 4 feet, 6 feet high. But to actually mass produce it, the combines, it took a lot of energy and resources.
Right.
So they have actually genetically modified it. So these wheat fields used to be 4, 6 feet. They're now 3 feet high. It's much easier to produce. That's number one. And number two, to actually protect the wheat, what are they spraying it with? Glyphosate. Roundup. And what does this do?
Well, they have it actually not only sprayed on it, and now they spray it right before harvest, so there's an extra dose, right? Which is great for sales for the company that makes that. But it leaves so much residue, but they actually have it grown now with that pesticide in it. Now, this is the thing that cracks me up about this whole genetic modification of putting the pesticide in a grain. That pesticide is in there to disrupt the digestive system of the bugs that eat it. And so to screw up their nervous system and kill them. So, but humans are supposed to eat that?
Same thing.
Same thing.
The
and
exact
so,
same thing.
And then we also have the issue is that they've increased the gluten off the charts. It has so much more gluten in it. And why is that? Because it makes it easier to make bread and noodles.
It's a glue.
It's a glue.
It's sticky.
It's a
a
glue. And this
substance.
is what happens when you eat it. It turns into this glutinous mess that your body can't break down and creates all this inflammation and trouble with your digestion.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring this up. When we talk about even gluten in even corn and how that's been genetically modified, even with the size of the stalks.
Right.
They are now, before animals such as cattle, pigs, chickens, before they go to slaughter, we realize they're giving this to them before. What does it do? Because it's high in the glycemic index, it fattens them up.
They get fat.
And now you're eating... You don't have to eat bread to have a gluten sensitivity. You're eating an animal who ate it conventionally, not organic, grass-fed. That's going to fatten them up, and you can have the exact same reaction because you're now eating eggs, chicken, pork, cows. It's crazy.
Well, then the added fact, because you get back to the inflammation in your gut, is they also feed all these animals pharmaceutical drugs that make them get fat too. So it makes you wonder, well, do people get fat when they take those pharmaceutical drugs? There's an asthma drug that they give to cows because in the last 30 days before market, they put on another 20% weight because of the asthma drug. In fact, Russia refuses to take our beef now because there's too much asthma drug in it, right? Well, in this country, we're all eating it. So what does that mean? You're eating it in conjunction with your gluten and all these other things you're allergic to, and you have so much stuff going in your body that creates autoimmune disease.
It's crazy. And we're talking about that asthma drug. It's a steroid, by the way.
Yeah, it's a steroid.
And that's very inflammatory, and that's already triggering what conventional medicine is using to treat autoimmunity. Immunosuppressant medication. We know oral steroids, same thing. And if you're getting that in the cow, you're eating that too.
Yeah, the danger though with gluten again though is the emotional component to it. Everybody, if it was all just intellectual, trying to figure out, well, this is bad for me, I shouldn't do it, it'd be okay. But man, we grow up eating bread on everything. We're so attached to bread. Your mom making bread when you were a kid, your cakes, all this stuff. And in fact, I have a gluten story myself. I don't eat gluten. I haven't for 9 years. But the reason I did it, and it was just kind of funny, my wife had been telling me for 10 years that I was allergic to gluten, but I didn't pay any attention to her. Right. So, but anyway, I went to a doctor and I was having some problems with my hand. In fact, for 5 months, I could barely use my one hand. I had broken it about 20 years ago and it never bothered me. Woke up one day, it was in May, and my hand hurt so bad I couldn't use it. And it got so bad that I couldn't button my shirt with it. I couldn't stick it in my right hand pants pocket. So I couldn't use that part of my pants anymore. Just couldn't use the hand at all. Really, and I'm someone who does a lot of my work on a computer, so it was really changing my life. Well, 4 months later, I go into a doctor. He tells me, well, you're slightly allergic to wheat, but you're also allergic to other things in bread. So why don't you just go off of it for 30 days? Well, 30 days was pretty tough. First 2 weeks was tough. But after that, I started to kind of forget about it. But I went and did a yoga weekend with my wife, who's an instructor, and I noticed after the weekend I didn't have a lot of pain in my joints.
So why was that?
And I thought, well, maybe it's the wheat, right? So I decided on my own, I'm going to go another few months without it. Because I had read where it takes 100 days or something. Well, 120 days after I stopped eating it, I woke up one day and my hand was normal. It didn't hurt. I could button my shirt. I could do anything I wanted to with my hand. And it has not hurt ever since.
It's interesting when you talk about gluten.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be in the gut. You can have other physical manifestations of this. And this could be brain fog, joint pain, rashes. The list is quite extensive.
Oh, man. I tell people now that I like my hand better than bread.
Now, and it's interesting, we talk about wheat and why people, I'm going to say, addicted to wheat. I love a good bread, but I realize I actually have a sensitivity. I don't have celiac disease, but the same thing with my stressors. It actually causes me a lot of bloating, intestinal gas, so there is a direct correlation with my gut. But the wheat acts on the brain chemistry as the glutamorphone, such as morphine, narcotics, chocolate, sugar. So it creates that same addictive property. So people have such a difficult time getting off of wheat or anything that is bread-based.
And a lot of that too is that you rarely ever talk to anybody that's not addicted to sugar. Mm-hmm. And so if you're addicted to sugar, every other addiction becomes so much easier. In fact, it doesn't matter if someone's a drug addict, alcoholic, whatever you want to call it. If you can get them to break their sugar addiction, the other things aren't that hard. And that's not a hard process to go through. But if you can handle that and you do it, the wheat becomes something that's pretty manageable. It's something you can really do. And for a lot of people, like you're gluten sensitive, it doesn't mean you can't have it once in a while.
No, I do. And
enjoy it.
Sure. But I know my body well enough. So I live by the 80-20 principle. 80% of the time, I'm following a paleo-based, nutrient, organic diet. But, listen, you have to live life. Sometimes, I love pizza. So once in a while, but I know I'm going to react to it, though. But I mentally prepare myself for that and realize, I'm going to have some gas bloating, maybe some fatigue. My energy level won't be good that next day. But, by the end of the day, is that ultimately worth it?
Yeah.
I ask myself that, but I still fall victim once in a while.
Once in a while, but if you realize that and you have it, and like you said, they show that your body can completely heal from an exposure in 3 days. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're someone that has bad reactions to it, have a great wheat meal once a week and enjoy it. Have it be your big special thing. Have the pizza, Don't eat it for another week.
Yeah.
Do that type of thing. I myself, I do much better if I just avoid it.
Just avoid it. And again, you're going to have to make that personal decision. And that is something that you don't need wheat to survive. We realize it is not nutrient dense, with a lot of other...
have you had this experience? I saw on a study that they now have done tests where they took people that were gluten sensitive, that have a lot of different health issues, even though they're not celiacs, and they gave them fermented bread made like it was 2,000 years ago, fermented for 4 days, then made into bread, and they didn't have a reaction.
They didn't have a reaction because it's made differently.
It's made differently. Okay. What does fermentation do? It takes the gluten and transforms it into something else.
That's correct.
It's something your body can actually use. And you know what? I tried that once. Because I read that study, and for a week I ate the stuff, didn't notice anything from it. I no longer ate it after that week.
I actually experimented with it.
I actually experimented with it because I figured I'd want to tell people about it. Cool. And I didn't notice any reaction, yet I don't eat it every day because I don't think I need that in my diet all the time.
No, and you know how you react to it. You don't want that hand pain coming back.
No, I don't. I like my hand.
Now, we did discuss genetics, the spectrum of autoimmunity, and there are certain things, epigenetic stressors, and gluten is a huge one. Now, we did start to discuss a little about this leaky gut or this intestinal hyperpermeability. Let's discuss that in a little bit more details. We just kind of touched over it briefly.
Yeah, that probably starts out with the combination of two things: stress, and then what you're eating. And the funny thing about that, if there's anything funny about it, is that when you're stressed, your diet goes completely haywire. So this is why I like to tell people you have to establish what your diet is going to be, because if you don't, when you go into stress, it's going to be the closest sugar fix you can actually get. And this is really, I like to remind people, you have 4 big things that you fall into with stress. They're all addictions: sugar, alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. And they all get worse with stress.
Yeah.
You have to have a program what you're going to eat at every meal, in general, so that you just normally fall into that eating pattern. And then just because you're stressed, you don't reach for something that's real quick that throws your entire system off. Because those cookies you're having at 10 a.m. because you're stressed out leads to that shot of whiskey at 4 p.m. because you're getting off work. It leads to that cigarette 3 times at lunch break. It leads to all these things because you're fluctuating. Your system's in a state of fluctuation and inflammation. So you have to be able to establish that. But the stress sets you up. Your stomach now, your digestion just doesn't work. And so now you're putting something you're allergic to in it, gluten generally, because that's what most people eat every meal. That causes the more separation. Your digestion's weak anyway. All of a sudden now you're going to react to every single thing you eat.
Sure.